I got a question from Bill. He's one of the people who posted comments on one of the videos I did. He asked if I could talk more about the corn, and I'm gonna do that now. I'll put Bill's channel right here. And one of the things that I find quite awesome about this is if you look at this corn, it is between two of the a squash cage and a tomato cage, and is literally in a 12-inch pot. And I've got there's 6 corn growing in here. When I originally planted it, there were 3 that sprouted and 3 didn't, so I replanted, and those 3, you can see here, this one's smaller. Those 3 came on later. But the ones that I originally planted, they're getting pretty darn close now to harvest, from what I can tell. You got one here that's pretty good size, and the ones below it, as is typical on corn. Let's see here. Here is smaller, and here's the middle one here, the upper and the lower, and then there's one on the other side. But for such a small area, the mature plants are putting on 2 corn per stalk, and that's 6 corn. If you take and you could grow all 6 to maturity, and each one puts on 2, well, what is that? That's 12. That's 12 cobs of sweet corn, and I just find that awesome. I never expected to get 2 corn per plant. Now, what has to happen is they need to be grown to maturity. That means that they have to be pollinated. And this is what they call the silks of the corn, and these are little bitty strands, and each strand of this silk equates to 1 kernel in the cob itself. So in order for this cob to be completely filled out, the pollen that comes from the top part up here has to flow and get stuck on one of the, or many of the hairs on each individual silk strand. And that's the way it works. If a corn cob can actually be completely full to almost no kernels whatsoever, depending on how well it's pollinated. And that's why you plant corn in big blocks. That way when wind blows it, it's blowing all over the place, and it'll fall on the corn silks. But in a greenhouse like what I'm doing, my thoughts were that I can plant them consecutively, whatever word you want to talk, one right after the other. So I could grow 6 in a pot, and well, let me show you over here. I've got some that are, you can see there, they're growing in that, and then I got some even smaller down over there. If you look through the tomatoes over there, you can see them. So I'm planting them successively, and that's what I'm trying to do with this experiment with the corn. First, I didn't know they would grow, and I'm being proved wrong. They are growing, in fact, in very tight quarters here, and it didn't seem to be growing very well. But I have to make sure they're pollinated. So one of the things I do is I have a fan on it, and that fan is not just for the corn. It's to kind of help with the humidity in the greenhouse, but it also has the added benefit, if you look real closely here, it is blowing the male pollen, or at least the heads here. In addition to that, every time I come in the greenhouse and I come in here, because these little pollen heads, whatever you want to call these, that drop the male pollen, They do it over a pretty good period of time, and they release, from what I understand, starting up here and then they go down. But anyway, what I do is I take the bottom of the stalk here, because I don't want to touch the silks here or block the pollen from hitting the silks here, and I shake the dickens out of it. The pollen is dropping, and we're just not going to know until I harvest these if it's being successful or not. And so that's part of the fun of it. We're just testing it to see. If it does work out, then obviously my plans is to grow the corn in the greenhouse. And the reason behind that is because last year I planted a lot of corn and something got every single cob of corn right before I was going to pick it, and I was so upset. So anyway, that's what's going on with the corn, and I'll bring you back when it's time for harvest. Okay, it's time. One of the surest ways to tell if sweet corn is ready is to pull part of it back here, and you can see that not all of it had been pollinated, but you take and you put your thumbnail into it. When it pops, you look at the liquid, and the liquid is kind of opaque, clear, then that's perfect. If it's really cloudy, then that's overripe, and if it's clear, it's underripe. So I'm going to take this ear off here, and you can see there it is in the bucket that has been cramped for this whole growing season. And let me pick another one here. I should think that these are both going to be done, if they're going to be done at all. Man, I was going on and on and on. You missed a whole lot of commentary. That may have been a good thing, but I had not hit the record button on the other side. But, okay, so here's the 6. These are off of 3 of those 6 corn plants. And I'm going to open them in front of you, get you to take a look and see what I see. Okay, so let's do this. And looks like this one was the best one. It had some pollination issues, and then about half, maybe a little more than half, was pollinated. So that was it. My takeaway is that greenhouse corn is definitely a possibility. Maybe not so much in the wintertime. Maybe humidity affected. I've got 2 other growings, at least 2, if not 3, and we're gonna check it a little further, see how it goes. Okay, this is Brent signing off.